Howdy folks, I'm Brian and here's some Reddit. Our first story is titled, Am I a Jerk for Telling My Son That He Is Not Welcome in My House If He Gets a Dog? The title doesn't paint me in the best light, but please hear me out. My ex-husband and I split about 3 years ago. We both have since found new partners and are quite happy co-parenting our 2 children, Milo, who is 17, and Jason, who is 14. Milo is essentially blind. He's completely blind in one eye and does not have a great deal of vision in the other. We have done what we can to support him and cater to his needs. He is a very confident and outgoing boy despite all of this, and it brings me a great deal of comfort knowing that he is happy. Everything was going absolutely perfectly until a few weeks ago. My ex's partner, who we'll be referring to as Mary, has a habit of getting involved in situations that do not concern her. She frequently tries to take over as mother when my boys are staying at their dad's house. She makes a point of butting into calls to talk to my boys, and when Milo was 15, she went out of her way to buy him Harry Potter books in Braille. She knows this was our thing. We'd curl up and sit on the sofa, and I'd read the books to him. Well, a while ago, she decided to stick her nose in and suggest that Milo get a guide dog. He doesn't really go out on his own. He's always accompanied by a friend or a family member. He was very sold on the idea and started looking into applying for one as his GP apparently agrees with Mary. I am not a fan of this idea. Milo, who is perfectly capable of navigating his way around the house and always has someone with him when he's outdoors. I just don't see why he needs a guide dog. I also admit that I'm a bit of a clean freak and I like everything to be sitting tidy. That's just not possible with a dog. I am not having my home be covered in dog hair and having the furniture chewed up and jumped on. The boy begged for a cat for ages and the cat hair is bad enough. I'm not a big fan of dogs. I was bitten as a child, and ever since I've always been a bit wary of them. We had a disagreement about this yesterday, and I snapped, telling Milo that he can have a dog if he wants, but he is not living under my roof with it. By all means, if he moved out and got a dog, then I wouldn't see any issue with it, but he's adamant that this is what he wants, knowing full well that I don't want the house to turn into an absolute pigsty. He has been informed that under no circumstances does he bring that animal into my home. He can visit as much as he likes without it, and I will of course visit him, but the dog can't live in my house. His dad and Mary, of course, have taken his side. Jason has tried to talk to his brother, but Milo seems dead set on this idea, and thinks that I'm a jerk for not allowing a dog in the house. Am I the jerk in this situation? Alright, so there is a few edits here. I'm going to put them on the screen if you're interested in reading them. I'll read the last one only. I understand Reddit. I will admit that I wasn't in the best state of mind earlier, and I was not ready to read all the comments, so I did come off a bit defensive. If it means that much to Milo and his independence, he can get the dog. Something about hundreds of people telling you that you are a jerk will do that to you. I took this suggestion and did some research regarding guide dogs, and I do not feel as strongly about having one in the house now that I know that they are well behaved. I did not set out to hurt my son, but it happened. I know I'm never going to like Mary, as much as it pains me to say she may have had a point in this matter. So it seems like there's a lot of jealousy here between you and Mary, and I mean, the way I perceive Mary and the way you're describing her, I feel like she's just looking out for the best interest of your children. And while your children are at her house, she does get to play a maternal role in their lives. And I think this is important to recognize. And I understand that you feel like in some cases, like with the Harry Potter book, that she is kind of encroaching on your territory, but to me it seems like she's trying to do things to help your son be more independent and help your son be able to survive on his own. And I think this is really sincerely coming from a good place on her part. As for you, I can understand a lot of your fears and your anxieties over this. I think that, being bitten by a dog when you were young probably plays heavily into this idea about why you wouldn't want a dog in your house. And certainly that can seem like a really scary thing. So I sympathize. With that said, I do think that this is a good resolution. I'm happy that things turned out the way they did and that you're going to be looking at getting a guide dog. And yeah, guide dogs are known to be remarkably well behaved, and they are, service animals in general are really good for the individuals that they serve. So, yeah, I'm really happy to hear that this one was resolved positively. You're the jerk. She's being a mother to your kids, which says to me she is looking after them and caring for them as well as being a positive role model. She got a present for your son and something that he would truly enjoy, but you got mad because you were the one who read books to him, and now you don't want him to get a dog that allows him independence. Strong, you're the jerk because this is screaming at me that you don't want him to have his independence and you want to control him. You gave him an ultimatum. I hope you are prepared for the potential negative effects. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that seeing the final edit really brings a lot to light here. I think that we can see that maybe, hopefully, that this was more about fear of the dog than it was about him not having his independence. All right, our next story is titled, Am I the jerk for getting mad that my oldest son didn't let my youngest win at a game? I have 4 kids. Only 2 are relevant to the story. My 10-year-old son we'll call Jack, and my 8-year-old son that we'll call Tony. They were playing Mario Kart with each other on their 3DS. My older son knows to let my youngest win, otherwise he'll throw a tantrum. The boys swapped their DSs because Tony's needed to be charged and Jack didn't really feel like moving from his spot. Like I said, Jack knows to let Tony win, but for some reason he didn't this time. Tony starts his usual I didn't win tantrum and threw Jack's 3DS across the room. The console broke, the top screen came off the bottom, and the buttons are unresponsive. And that's why I got mad at him. He had been repeatedly told to let Tony win to avoid a tantrum. My husband and my 2 girls, 16 and 17, are saying that I should make Tony give Jack his 3DS. But I think it's Jack's own fault for giving him his one and then not letting him come in first place. Jack is refusing to share anything with Tony, and he has hardly spoken to me in days, so I'm left to deal with this constant tantrum on my own. Am I the jerk? This behavior is really bad, and you are enabling your son to have these tantrums. And when you reward negative behavior like this, there's no incentive to act positively. So I really think that this is a huge problem and that, yes, you are a jerk here. You should be disciplining your children, and I think that if your son broke your other son's console, then there needs to be some kind of consequence there. Otherwise, he's just going to continue to do these bad things, and he knows he'll get away with them. He's not being taught to act appropriately, and he's being taught that he can do bad things and get away with them. And when you teach kids that they can do bad things and get away with them, that's a recipe for disaster. It's not going to help him grow up to be a mature adult who can function in society. Your other son has every right to win a video game if he wins based on skill. And also, losing is a part of life. Your son is going to encounter situations where he loses, and it's important to remember that if he doesn't have the grit or resilience built up to a losing situation with small losses, then later in life, these larger losses could really be devastating to him. You're the jerk and a crappy parent. It's not Jack's responsibility to handle Tony's tantrums. You do not reward bad behavior. Tony throws tantrums to get his way and just goes along with it. He has you trained. Tony is old enough to understand that there are consequences to his actions. Having to give his brother his toy is a natural consequence of breaking his brother's toy. Get a grip before Tony grows into an entitled adult with no sense of accountability. Our next letter is titled, Am I a jerk for wiping my son's electronics and deleting everything after multiple warnings when he refused to do school? I have a 12-year-old son. Well, actually, he's my adopted nephew. Because my sister has a myriad of health and addiction issues that led to her being unable to be a parent after she gave birth, who is now my son. Because of this, he has severe learning disabilities and ADHD and has to take medicine and go to therapy for it. Before the pandemic, he found solace with friends who he hung out with frequently. And ever since everything was locked down, he has found it a bit of a challenge not to meet with them face to face. However, none of this is an excuse for the fights that he puts up when I tell him to keep his school-issued laptop downstairs and gets into Zoom to meet with his classes. Oftentimes, he'll either sit and refuse to open his laptop and get into the meeting, and oftentimes it escalates into a back and forth where he shows a nasty attitude and I yell at him to get into Zoom, and he tries to evade taking responsibility. He's had his Xbox and personal computer taken away, and now he's lost freedom and privileges when it comes to using them. He can only use his school-issued laptop downstairs with my oversight. I've made multiple warnings that if he keeps making life hard for me and not getting his education, that I would make him wipe all of his electronics, and I would set them back up with parental controls to limit and monitor what he does until he develops a maturity and becomes responsible for himself. Yesterday was the final straw. After an hour-long struggle, I broke down and told him that was that. I warned him multiple times that if he didn't cooperate, that I would delete everything, and I would be making good on my promise. So before school, I made him log into his Xbox and his personal computer and go into the settings and wipe their hard drives. He began to cry and resist, telling me that he would lose all his progress in his games and whatever personal files he had, like his Minecraft worlds that he had login credentials for. But I told him that I didn't care. He brought this on himself. If he doesn't comply, then I would physically destroy them and take them to a recycling center. He begrudgingly reset them as I stood over him, making sure he didn't pull a fast one. I then confiscated them for a week. Since yesterday, he has been sporadically crying and sobbing and refusing to eat or talk with us. Instead, he's been going into the other room and airing out his grievances to my other son, who is 18's pet birds. Speaking of my other son, he says what I did was over the top and unwarranted, but I tell him that it's between me and his brother, and he needs to stay out of our business. I think the real issue here is that your son spent a lot of time and energy developing these virtual worlds and these games and doing all these different things. And that's really hard to lose those kinds of things. And I've said it before that I think that digital property should be considered physical property, that if you destroy it, you're essentially destroying someone's property. And when it comes to Minecraft especially, you deleted your son's virtual world that he helped build and grow and develop, and I can understand why losing something like that he probably poured hundreds of hours into would be devastating for him. With all that said, there does need to be some kind of consequence for your son's bad behavior, but you can set up parental controls without deleting your son's data. So I think that this is a travesty in a lot of ways, that you've basically destroyed a lot of things that your son looked forward to, and I think that that's a really bad thing to do, and I do think that makes you a jerk here. As for what should you have done, again, I think that you probably should have set up parental controls. I don't think there was anything wrong with that, and I think that limiting his use of these devices is perfectly acceptable. I think that's an acceptable form of punishment. I think that, again, time and therapy is what your son's probably going to need, and to help with his issues. And during these times, everyone's fuses are a bit short. These are hard times on you, but they're also hard times on your son. And you're right, it doesn't excuse his bad behavior, but there does need to be some kindness and gentleness. I feel for you, again, that you are at the end of your fuse here because of the whole situation. You're the jerk. You can set up parental controls without deleting all of his data. This is like, instead of taking away the car keys to ground a teenager, you run the car off a cliff. Yeah, a car he put hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of work into. I've no doubt that I would have lost my patience long before OP, but I don't think they understand how bad this is. I think this will be our last story. Am I a jerk for expecting my ex-girlfriend to help finish what we started? Okay, so almost 2 years ago now, my ex and I embarked on a very young-hearted and enthusiastic adventure. We agreed that we would spend the following year at my sister's house while building a tiny house on wheels in her backyard. Over the course of the following 6 months, we had relatively rapid progress, but I started to notice something. I started to realize that nearly all of the labor was taken on by myself alone. I brought this to her attention and spoke about it and came to a work agreement. This fell through many, many times over. There were obviously more deep details about our living situation harming our relationship, but we stayed on the same page for the most part. Over a year had gone by and we started living in the house. But by the metric of what I mentioned earlier, I had effectively built the whole thing. We had both equally contributed funds, and when we could, we jointly took care of bills. Both sets of our parents had also funded this in part. At about a year and 2 months, our relationship hit a dead end, and she separated to live with some friends at their house, and I brought the tiny house to another property to finish. Fast forward 5 months, and I'm still at the property. I'm using the facilities outside for a lack of plumbing, unable to get a cent or any form of labor from her to contribute. She is currently traveling and takes little to zero personal responsibility for the situation. I feel like I've been very accommodating to her, given the circumstances, and gracious. To have come this far without being more vengeful. Her perspective is that it's unfair to expect somebody to live beyond what they're capable of to meet somebody's expectations. The expectations she's referring to is sticking to the deal of building the tiny house. Am I the jerk or what? Okay, so the initial deal was that for you to spend a year, it sounds like, building this little tiny house, and a year has passed. She did her part by contributing equally, and the surprising thing here is that she hasn't even asked you for the money back for the house that she contributed to. She isn't living there, and you don't have to live there either. That's that. You are choosing to live in this house, and you are choosing to finish it off. That is your personal choice at this point in time, and she's not forcing you to do that. So yes, you're a jerk for expecting her to continue to contribute to your household, even though she isn't living there. This isn't how relationships work. Once she's out, she's out. And I mean, I think you should count yourself lucky because she isn't asking for all the money that she's poured into this house. And that gets tricky because, this is shared property. You both contributed equally to it. You put a lot of labor into it. So there's a pretty big legal mess here that I don't think we have the time to get into. Laughing my butt off. Am I the jerk for wanting to get my ex to contribute to a place that she has zero interest in or interested in living in for my exclusive benefit? You're the jerk. I mean, pretty much. Exactly, I was expecting to read that she wanted to be reimbursed for any financial contributions to a house that she no longer lived in or owned, and if he refused, and that he was going to be the jerk. But nope, OP just wants more of her money to finish the house that she won't live in. Alright folks, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. On screen right now is the schedule for the following week. So, let me know what you think. Do you have any suggestions here? Do you want to see any changes to the schedule? If so, comment below. Maybe I'll take your suggestions. Someone suggested a while back for me to read some of the comments, and those lines have kind of blurred here. I've been reading like one comment maybe per story on the non-comment days, and on the comment days I've generally been reading more comments, 3 or 4, but I know that sometimes people like to see the top comment and they're usually short, so I usually try to give them their place. So let me know if you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider giving me a thumbs up. If you didn't, consider telling me why in the comments below. Also, if you're not subscribed and you made it this far, consider subscribing. Why not? I just read Reddit all day. Well, not all day. I have a real job. This isn't my real job. I would be living on no money. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. The console broke. The top scream came. The top scream. Ah!